My earliest recollection of childhood would have to be dealing with the church. My mom and dad were Salvation Army officers with the Salvation Army, so I was raised in the church from the time that I was born. We would always go. My dad was a preacher, my mom was a preacher, so church was part of life for me. I think the earliest thing that I can really remember is just the disconnect with my father. It was difficult for me. Dad was so busy doing the things that the church required of him that oftentimes I felt as if he didn't have time for me. One of my greatest love languages is time. And it took a long time for me to figure that out, but it is. And so growing up was good. Parents were great. They did what they could do as a parent. But for me, my perception was that my father wasn't there enough for me, that he didn't care for me, that he didn't love me because the time was a factor and he didn't spend that with me. So we also, during the course of my childhood, moved about every 3 to 4 years. So for me, peer-to-peer contact and peer-to-peer relationship was very difficult for me. I'm a quiet guy, kind of introverted in the way that I think and the way that I feel. And so it was difficult for me to make new friends. And I knew as we would move from place to place to place, that I would eventually move. And so I thought, well, what's the point? Why do I want to make connections with these people when I'm just going to move again in a few years? So with the disconnect with my dad and the disconnect with peers, I just kind of became this introverted thing. Books became my favorite outlet. I loved to read, and I could spend hours in my room reading, and I didn't really know at the time, but I was really setting myself up for some really bad social disconnects. I could be a social butterfly if I had to. I knew that in church settings and in those contexts that it was required that I be able to network and intermingle with people. But I could do that, but then as soon as I would leave that situation, it was pretty much back to the shutdown, and I would never push in or push out to extend myself socially. I did what was required, and then I would kind of shut down. So for me, it became this thing of being shut down socially, shut down emotionally. I didn't feel like I had to push in to gain social relationship, to gain emotional connection with other guys and other peers, with my dad. So it just became a place for me of just being shut down all the way around. And I didn't realize that this is what was going on, that this is what I was doing. When I entered high school, I was in band, so we had that as a social outlet, and I thought I was doing okay, but I started noticing at that age, 13, 14, 15, my attraction towards other guys. I didn't connect it in a sexual manner. I just all thought, oh, wow, I like the way that he does this, or I like the way that he handles that, or, he's pretty muscular. Wow, I wonder, does he work out? And I began to see these other guys, and they became greater, and I became lesser. My self-esteem began to weaken more and more and more as I fantasized about being connected with these guys or actually being that particular individual. And this progressed all the way through high school. And then in the place of being emotionally shut down, along with that, it was this huge disconnect with how I perceived myself and what the relational development that should happen there. But the manifestation, I think, for the actual same-sex attraction, the step off into homosexuality, happened for me at the age of 17, when I was spending the night at a friend's house, and this sexual encounter just kind of happened. It was one of those things that just developed. And it took me by surprise, but at the same point in time, it was like, oh, this is what I'm lacking. This is what I just kind of had a big connection with this experience that had just happened. And it filled something in me, but at the same time, it pulled something out of me. So it put me in this dichotomous position of a push-pull situation.